Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Sola Abulu and Associates, our YouTube channel. My name is Sola Abulu. I'm the principal consultant of Sola Abulu and Associates. Today we're going to be talking about the role of communications with regard to operational excellence. Operational excellence is really just about how you make an organization work in the way that it's intended and make things really working well. We have a definition here. But before I go into that, just to talk a little bit about why I decided to do this video. I am a strategy and a communications consultant. That's what my firm does. We do strategy, we do communications. And what we work with management teams to make them achieve their goals in terms of organizational effectiveness, as well as reputation risk management and strategic communication. So sometimes we work with companies and firms who have what you would call a communications challenge. And then sometimes we work with companies that have what you call an organizational challenge as well. And it really depends. So, but we use communication as the tool and by which we bring things together, either help the organization to have internal alignment on an issue, or to frame an issue, or to understand what the issue is, or get data and insights from within and outside of the organization, and just string together a compelling narrative that brings everybody together, creates a case for change, and then moves them in a direction. So so that's basically what we do. But one of the reasons why I thought about doing this was that I see that a lot of business leaders struggle in terms of understanding how communications fits into their organization. People just think of communication in terms of the external relations aspect of it. So once, it's when I need to do media, or I need to do a campaign, or I need to make an announcement, that's when I need communication. Or I just need to inform my staff about something. So yes, I communicate to them. They do not really understand that communication is actually the glue that makes everything come together, and that it has to be done with as much purposeful intent as you would with your commercial strategy, your contracting strategy, your financial strategy, your legal strategy, your human resources strategy. The same way you are as purposeful and intentional about that, that is how you have to be with communication as well, because it brings everything together. And I find out that a lot of business leaders treat communications like an afterthought, and it's something that they just do. You don't take too much thought to it. You just, okay, we need to do this, we try to do this, let's go and tell them. You're not thinking about what am I trying to achieve? You're not thinking about how am I going to craft this message in a way that the people are going to, understand and do what I want, and how does this fit into the big picture? So that big picture thinking is what we're going to try to talk about today. And I'm really looking at time. I'm going to try to do this in like 15 minutes max, 20 minutes at the very, very most. And I should be able to do that. So operational excellence, let's start with our definitions. It's always good to start off with definitions. So in terms of definitions, I got this from the Institute of Business Management. Operational excellence can be defined as an approach to business management that emphasizes continuous improvement. Yeah, just to get back to that, yes. So it's an approach to business management that emphasizes continuous improvement across all aspects of the business and within all business processes, by creating a culture where management and employees are invested in business outcomes and empowered to implement change. So let's think about that. Continuous improvement, all aspects of the business, within all business processes, creating a culture. How do you create a culture? You create a culture by modeling, by speaking, by values, by communicating, by engaging, by listening, by responding, and crafting, of course, that culture. Culture is communicated. We see that, music, entertainment, drama, culture is communication in words and in deeds and all of that. And we're invested in business outcomes and empowered to implement change. So let's break that down a little bit. So I came up with this operational excellence wheel, which I had shared on my LinkedIn page. But when I shared it, I hadn't shown the communications link as clearly as we have tried to do here. And if you look at this, what I put here was my own experience of the things that high-performing organizations do to make sure that they achieve their targets and they deliver as promised. And first of all, you talk about the leadership and business strategy. That's the starting point. And that is the agenda and the tone that is set by the leadership in terms of what we are going to do and why. And, leadership sets the tone, and that business strategy, you fail in that number one, of course, you're not even going anywhere. But then number two, which is another thing that I see that a lot of organizations sort of like gloss over is the corporate culture and performance management piece. And this really has to do with the level of tolerance or intolerance for non-performance and value eroding behaviors. I mean, I consult across a broad spectrum of organizations, and the first thing I watch out for is this corporate culture and performance management. What's the tolerance level for for non-performance? That tells me a lot, as in how much effort does the leadership put into making it clear, providing clarity to the organization about what they want to achieve, why, and the standards and the parameters and what is acceptable and not acceptable behaviors. To a very large extent, I would say in the international organizations, I think there is a whole lot more intentionality about corporate culture for obvious reasons, because people are coming from diverse cultures anyway. So they know that if they don't bring people together into a unified culture, they're just going to be all over the place and people are just going to be doing things anyhow and things are just not going to work. It's to be impossible to move to deliver a shared vision or work in the same direction. But I find out that in the in our local Nigerian, I am based in Lagos, Nigeria. I found out that in organizations where there is a perception that there is a unified culture from, which is not the case, because even in no matter, even if it's one nation organization, there will always be diverse work cultures within that organization. I see that there is less intentionality. There's a lot of room for personal interpretation, which isn't helpful, because then you find some units working very well, some other units really, really lagging, and then, dragging everybody back, and then nobody's able to sort of like, the people who are high performing are picking up the slack for those who are not, and there is nobody to really rally things together and be like, no, we're not accepting this, and there's just a lot of tolerance for things that there shouldn't be, and yeah, at the end of the day, it erodes value from the organizations. And many of these companies are therefore not really be able, they do not, they struggle to really, how would I say, become the kind of large corporations that you see that move into territories across countries and outlast their founders and that kind of thing. So employee engagement is also a measure of how switched on the average employee is to the overall strategy. And if you have a firm or an organization where the employees are just switched off, that is already an indicator of its own. It's not a good sign. Because if people are switched off, they're not going to go above and beyond for you. It's very likely they won't care whether you meet your targets. It's very, very likely that there's going to be a lot of value erosion going on. It's very likely that a lot of leaks are going to be happening in that organization. Nobody will speak up, nobody will care, and the business will suffer for it. And then ethics, standards, and processes, that's another thing, the Bible says where there is no law, there is no sin. So in an organization where you do not have standards, you do not have processes, you therefore cannot hold people accountable for not doing what they should have or what you think that they should have done. For that reason, it's very important as an organization becomes bigger and more complex. There must be standards, protocols, and processes about the operations and everything that is done, just so that there's clarity and people are not, you don't leave it to people's, how would I say, judgment and their own way of thinking in terms of how they do things. But you are able to put predictability into your operation simply because there is a standard about how you, for instance, manage your payments, how you manage your contracts, how you manage your relationships with the communities, how you manage your technical processes, your commercial processes. There just has to be standards. Otherwise, things are not going to work. And you will find out that, again, there will be some high performing areas in your organization and there will be some very, very low performing areas. And if it turns out that those low performing areas are the ones that are supposed to really bring income into the business, then there's a problem. Another thing that works in high performing organizations do is that they make sure that their organization is fit for purpose and they grow their own talent for a healthy and a robust pipeline. I worked in a multinational firm for a number of years. Most of what I'm sharing here is what I've seen over the 22 years of my career before I started my own company. And what I noticed was that it got to a point when the organization became so large and unwieldy, and it wasn't, at par with the business. So the company was always tweaking the organization until it was able to deliver what it wanted to. The organization was very quick to adapt and wasn't, first of all, they were very numbers focused. So anytime the numbers came back with how would I say, feedback that is not palatable, they will do something about it. And I think that's what the multinationals, the advantage that the multinationals have, because they have investors who are not, they're not sentimental about some of these things. So they're just really looking at the bottom line. And when they see that the numbers are not adding up, they're very quick to make decisions. I know sometimes some of those decisions may look like they are inhuman and things like that, but to a very large extent, there is no point carrying an organization that is not delivering for you, because at the end of the day, if the organization is unable to deliver, then it cannot carry the weight. It can't pay the salaries. It can't, do the things that it's supposed to do. So the level of tweaking, whatever it is you need to do, either, changing, moving people around, changing capabilities and all of that, there has to be an effort put in place to make sure that our organizations are fit for the purpose that we need it. That's just it. So if I need, for instance, a number of people working in the factory with a certain amount of skills, and the people that I have are not skilled to that level, I have to do something about it. Otherwise, that factory will never produce the kind of output at the rate, the time that I want. It's just the way things are. So that's another thing. You always look at your organizational health, and then you grow your talent pipeline, meaning at every point in time, you have a robust pipeline of senior leaders, middle level workers, and then interns and people coming in, so that people are learning, people are growing. As people move off because of life and all that, there are other people coming in as well. Another thing that I see that high-performing organizations do is that they also manage their stakeholders and their audiences pretty well. I think one thing that my observation has been is that some companies and organizations are better at doing this than others. I think generally in my environment, I notice that we are better at managing stakeholders than we are at managing audiences, because our stakeholders are known most of the time. They are people who they already exert influence over our operation. So we know. So if it's government, if it's an investor, we know. So we know we need to engage them, because we know that if we don't, there's going to be consequences for it. I think where we struggle is in engaging audiences, which are people that they may not necessarily have present interest or influence in your organization, obviously, but there are people you should be speaking to because they are potential influencers. So there are people who are generally, how would I say, potentially engaged citizens in that space. So when you have, for instance, if you now want to do something, you want to make a play for something in a larger space, those people may now cross over into the stakeholder space. So they may not currently be there, or they may be in conversations where they're in a position to influence the so they may be in a position to influence a decision that is being made about you. So you should always engage in. Sometimes it's even members of the public, because again, reputation is not just what your stakeholders say about you, but what a lot of people say about you. So depending on the kind of business you're in, if you're in the kind of business that has a national footprint or has implication to the national economy or a regional economy, then you should be engaging, communicating with audiences as well as stakeholders. Of course, stakeholders will have a more day-to-day interaction with you, but you have to be able to know when you need to speak to your audiences. That's when things like you issue your press releases, you have press statements, website statements, advertising, things that you just do generally, not because you're speaking to your investors, but because you are establishing your presence in the market and making sure that you are building up a groundswell of goodwill for you for when you need it, because everyone needs that goodwill at some point, and you will never know when you need it. It's always good to have invested in it before the time, just like you do in your bank. It's not, you save money, you make sure you have cash assets for when you need it. It's not when you need money that you start looking for cash. That's not good business sense. So brand and reputation. Again, high-performing companies are those that proactively manage their brand and their reputation, and they treat it like a critical asset or predetermined value. In fact, there is a way every organization should know the value of their brand, the dollar value of their brand, and there are methodologies that you can use to actually determine this. And I think at a separate video, I will show some of the methodologies that are out there, and then you can then choose the one that you would want to use just to know the value of your brand if you don't know it already. I've also worked in an organization where the value of the brand was known, was assessed, and known and communicated to everybody within the organization, so that people knew that this was the value of the brand, and they were able to carry on their work in their spaces with that understanding of what the big size of the pie is and what was at stake, and therefore proactively manage the reputation of the company and the brand, bearing in mind that there's a bigger brand that is at stake. So you do not, because you want to secure your $20,000 value of the chain, you now create a problem for a multi-million-dollar brand or a multi-billion-dollar brand, as it may be. So again, finally, one other thing that I know that I have observed that high-performing organizations do as part of operational excellence is building, nurturing an inclusive and cross-generational leadership. So having a work environment that somehow creates space and support for ideas and innovations to come from different levels within the organization and different demographics. So you have young people coming in, and even though they are coming in, you don't just keep them at the bottom, you put them on projects, to make them, to bring in that energy into it, and you must have a way of doing that, because if you're not able to mix up your workforce, you will miss out on a lot of things. And this happens in a lot of organizations where you look at everybody around the decision-making table or around the project management table, and all of you literally look the same. So if there's going to be a problem, you will likely, and if one person misses it, it's very likely that all of you will miss it, because you all think the same way, you are all cut from the same cloth. That should not be the way, because any forward-looking organization needs to create a system, and it can be formal, it can be informal, whereby you are able to get ideas and innovation from different levels, from the shop floor, different demographics, men and women, young and old within the organization. It just makes sense, because everybody has a blind spot. And the more you can get different voices at different points of the decision-making tree, as well as the ideas generation or ideation spaces, it's better for the health of your organization, and the strength and the robustness of the decisions that you make, and how well you are risk-proofed and future-proofed against different kinds of risks. So the point in all of this is that you would notice that there's a common thread that rides through all of these things, and the common thread is communication. Because everything from when leadership sets the tone, leadership has to communicate. In fact, I find that I have rarely come across a leader that is a good communicator that is a bad leader. I have never, or doesn't achieve. It is possible to be a good leader and be a bad communicator. But it is possible, how would I say? I think it's possible to be, in fact, I don't think it's possible to be a good leader and to be a bad communicator. I think it's quite difficult to achieve that. But even if you happen to be, in fact, it's almost impossible to be a good leader. You can achieve a lot of targets without being a good communicator, but to sustain it in a very big and complex situation, no, it's impossible to lead effectively a complex organization or project over a long period of time without being a good communicator, without being, you will need, somebody must be doing that communication work. If you are not the one doing it, somebody else must be doing it. So if the leader isn't doing it, perhaps there's somebody else doing it, because they have to set the tone, they have to set the agenda. For you to have a constantly high-performing organization, there has to be a corporate culture around it. It has to be intentional. That again is driven by communications. Performance management too is driven by communication. So you have a system that communicates targets, gets interactive response between the staff and the employees, the staff and management, and you are able to arrive at targets, create a support system for people to deliver, not just telling them, okay, go and deliver this, but then staff are able to say, okay, for me to deliver, I need this. You have that sort of like commitment conversation going on, again, communication. And then, eventually you arrive at standards that deliver the stretch with the support system in place to a very large extent, and then you achieve them, and then you increase those targets as time goes on. The employees are also carried along. They believe, the whole engagement process, communication and engagement process that you've woven around the performance management keeps staff employed, engaged, and they begin to think that they are really part of the successes of the businesses. And again, the leaders also put in standards and processes that is communicated to people up front. There is consequence for violation of some of these policies. That is also communicated ahead of time. There is clarity about the do's and don'ts of the organization. I have never seen, particularly on this left side, I think this is where success actually begins. I think, and that's why we have this 1, 2, 3, 4 on the first 4 side. If an organization can deliver on these 4 things, you are very likely going to be very successful, and you'll be well positioned to then do the rest of it. And I think these are foundational things. I think these are things that we must do. The things on the left side are things that you have to do, in the early stages of the business and all that. I would also, on the things of the right hand side, they also go along with it. For instance, your brand and your reputation, you will have to be building that as you go along. But then if you haven't gotten your corporate culture all sorted out, if you do not have a very strong business strategy, your employees are not engaged. I mean, really, you can't be, if you're not internally effective, then you cannot be externally effective. Yeah, in fact, you're not building any brand. So for me, I would always say, start off with those foundational things well enough. I mean, if you can do all together, that's fine. But then what helps you build the brand value and the brand asset is the strength of the ethics, the standards, the processes, how engaged your employees are, how much they're able to deliver, the performance that you're able to deliver, which brings me to another thing. Reputation is about performance, behaviors, and communications. And that's why this is very important, this left side. Actually, I realize that that's what is missing from that. That ties the left side with the right side, because performance and behaviors, then communications is what adds up to your reputation. So your reputation does not exist in a vacuum. Communication too does not exist in a vacuum, which is why you see communication not being part of the operational excellence wheel, but it is an underlay, it is embedded, it is actually the ecosystem within which all of this must work. And an organization that is not able to weave communication into how it operates will surely be a poor performing organization, will be an inefficient and ineffective organization. That's just the way it works. So I'm going to stop here, because I think really this is something that one can talk about. We can unpack so much about each of the elements, but really the idea is, particularly for communications practitioners who struggle to articulate the value of communication to their organizations, it goes far beyond what you do externally. In fact, everything that I have written here is actually about internal, I won't say internal, I'll say business communication, which is actually well done. If you have people who are corporate communications professionals in your organization, they can actually help you with this. And if you don't have that kind of expertise, you can also reach out to people like ourselves who help organizations in this way. We can help you to be intentional about your culture, about your performance management, about communicating your business strategy and the clarity that is required around it, and getting your employees engaged, understanding the undertones within your organization and what needs to change. What is the current thinking around ethics? What are the standards you have? What are the processes? What are the information gaps in those spaces? How do you bridge them? And then how do you engage with your stakeholders and your audiences? Doing an audit of where we are in terms of, our voice, our share of voice externally and externally. From the leadership perspective, what do we need to change if we need to get to that point? How is our brand doing? How is our reputation doing? Are we managing it as a critical asset of predetermined value? Do we know the value of our brand? These are all things that strategic communications consultants can help you with if the expertise is not resident in-house. So I'll leave it at that for now. I hope this has been an insightful, how would I say, video for you about the role of communications in operational excellence. Thank you very much for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.